Hi. Recently, people have been talking about the federal response given the coronavirus pandemic. And they've been saying, wow, it has been so horrible. The federal government wasn't able to provide supplies. The federal government didn't seem to know what to do. The federal government wasn't able to provide correct information. Many Californians have taken that to mean that it's all Trump's fault. Trump screwed this up, and if Trump wasn't here, the federal government would have done perfect. Let me show that's complete garbage. So, there's a book. There you go. It's called California's Next Century 2.0. It was published in 2012, 8 years ago. Now, in a chapter at the very back, I talk about how the federal government has been horrible with emergency response going back 20 years. In 2012, I did not know Trump was going to be president. I didn't know there would be a coronavirus epidemic, and I didn't know they'd do horrible at handling it. So how was I able to document multiple federal responses gone wrong with emergencies relating to California going back 20 years in 2012? If it's all Trump, then everything should have been great before Trump. Well, no. Turns out the feds are horrible at taking care of us Californians and have been that way for 31 years. Yes, you heard that correct. That's 31 years. So, let's go back to 1989, 31 years ago. This story is going to go over 4 American presidents, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 11 crises over a 31-year period where the feds consistently screwed up, didn't take care of business, and told California, well, you got this, right? So, 1989, Bush Sr., Loma Prieta earthquake. California waited 4 years for federal reimbursement. We wanted to retrofit the buildings so there would not be another earthquake with buildings collapse in the future. The federal government said no, they're not going to give any assistance to retrofit the buildings to make sure Californians don't die in a future earthquake. They also waited almost half a decade to give us money for that. Governor Duke Majan had to raise taxes on Californians with a 25% sales tax to raise $761 million, just under $1 billion. So, no federal assistance. They're slow, they're late, it doesn't come, they wait for years, and then we have to tax ourselves close to $1 billion. Bush Sr. Let's go to 1992 with Bill Clinton, or William Clinton Jr. So California said, hey, can we have assistance on a bailout because there's a recession? President Clinton campaigned on helping California in with this recession, and then President Clinton backed out of his word and gave no assistance to California in the recession, even though he acted like he would, and many Californians believed him. So, tricked us. 1992, we got nothing. By the way, we had been a donor state. So we'd already been paying more in the system than we got. We got nothing when it really counted, and we were tricked by a Democrat. 1994, the Northridge earthquake. Once again, the federal government does not help enough and asks California to kind of pay for it on its own mostly. So Governor Wilson criticized President Clinton, a fellow Democrat, and Governor Wilson said, we have to cover the rest on our own. We're a donor state. Why can't you cover the full funding? Wilson had to raise taxes on Californians with a 25% sales tax in order to cover the revenue that wasn't going to come from the federal government. So this is 2 earthquakes. We're a donor state. The feds will not cover the full cost. They will not reimburse us for all of our money, although we put more into the federal system than we get out. And then we have to raise taxes on ourselves. Yeah, that was Clinton. So, in the 90s, let's go to 1997. There was so what happened was in the early 1991, I wrote about this in my book, the Soviet Union collapsed, everybody went to trade, everybody joined international trade. You had a lot of currencies being linked for the first time, and that was good because it allowed for international trade, which California is all about since 1540. However, because you linked all these countries together, you started linking some of the currencies. Some of the currencies were not managed correctly. So you had what's known as the Asian financial crisis or the Russian ruble collapse in 1997. So that meant because the US dollars had invested in Asia, I think it was Indonesia and in Russia, and because the currencies were collapsing, that could bring down the whole dollar. So it's called the Asian financial crisis. It was a big thing in 1997. Now, here's the thing. The federal government, in order to respond to that crisis, to save the dollar, which Californians used, invented a economic policy that completely went against the benefit of California's economy. So the Fed increased liquidity in order to deal with the Asian financial crisis. That set off the dot-com bubble. So U.S. dollars linked to foreign currencies not being handled correctly, U.S. dollar starts to fall. The federal government says we're going to increase liquidity, which means the amount of dollars in circulation. That sets off the dot-com bubble here in California. Then in 2000, the federal government says, well, we want to tighten credit, meaning they remove as much dollars from the economy, and that create the dot-com burst. So the federal government, to try to save the U.S. dollar for the benefit of everyone in America, created the dot-com bubble, and then the federal government created the dot-com burst. That obliterated the California economy. Thanks. Good looking out for everybody in America except for us. Well done. Okay, let's move on. That was 1997, 2003. So in 2003, there was what's known as the electrical deregulation. California changed the law on electricity. It allowed private competitors to come in and provide services. There were rolling brownouts throughout California where people had their power cut off, shut down, and reduced. Californians had never seen that before. They were very mad. So, how did the brownouts happen? Well, it turns out that the federal government protected the Enron Corporation, which was allowed to price gouge Californians. And while Enron was price gouging Californians, which allowed for the brownouts to happen, which was allowed because of federal protection by George W. Bush, who was from Texas, which is where Enron was from. At the same time, the federal government did nothing to help California provide power to its people in an emergency. So the feds created a situation, Californians suffered, and then the feds did nothing to help us with that emergency. That was 2003 with the brownouts. Governor Davis said, we got no help from the federal government. Governor Davis literally said, we got no help from the federal government. Okay, well, let's go to 2005 to 2007. So there was the September 11th terrorist attacks. Now, the interesting thing about that was that the Department of Homeland Security was created in order to prevent future terrorist attacks. The director of the Homeland Security Department, Chertoff, hired by Bush Sr., said the most terrorist susceptible place in all of America to be hit is California. So the new director of Homeland Security, agency created to stop terrorism, says, hey, you know the best place terrorists are going to hit? Most likely to have a terrorist attack, most highest number of deaths is California. But they waited 5 years, half a decade, to get us our 9/11 security assistance. In fact, Senator Dianne Feinstein was so appalled, she wrote a letter in 2007 pointing out that it's been 5 years. California doesn't even have money for radiation detectors to prevent terrorists bringing nuclear bombs into the ports of Oakland or throughout California and killing people. So, terrorist attack. America says, we've got you, we're covering this. The expert in charge of how to prevent a terrorist attack says you should make sure California is the most secure. The federal government does not do that and waits 5 years to give us our basic funding. Fortunately, no terrorists got through and killed millions of Californians. But that's just luck. We didn't actually have the infrastructure to protect us, and we never got it from the federal government. Yeah, that happened. That happened. 2007. Yes, look into it. We were vulnerable to terrorist attack for half a decade. And then a senator had to go, what the hell's going on here? Happened. And no one ever heard of Trump at that time being president. He was not there. This is the federal government. This is 2007. This is 13 years ago. Okay. 2006, Senator Boxer talks to the Federal Emergency Management Association about their plans for earthquake emergencies in California. Now, the federal government has known that one of the most likely places to have a major earthquake was San Francisco in California. Senator Boxer in 2006 was really upset to learn that FEMA had no plan for how to deal with a California earthquake. 2006, Federal Emergency Management says, actually we have no plan for an earthquake in California, even though we know you're the most likely to have one. Yeah, that happened. So, 2008, Bush Sr., there are forest fires going on in California. We need federal assistance. There's none. In fact, we don't even get our own Californians to help forest fires because they're fighting a federal war in Iraq that Californians protested the most against. So Californians did not want the Iraq war. They took California soldiers, transported them over there. They weren't here for the fire season. There was no federal assistance. And then California had to spend tax money to rent fire assistance from other states. So we're already a donor state. They already took our Californians. They provided no federal assistance. And then we had to spend additional money to rent equipment to do the Fed's job to save ourselves from being burned alive. It was so bad that Schwarzenegger, who was friendly and campaigned with Bush Sr., immediately stopped talking to him. 2008. 2009. California is going into a recession. They were told by economists, Kevin O'Leary, in the LA newspaper in 2009, Kevin O'Leary said that economists were warning that if California goes down, because it's so large, it'll pull the entire U.S. economy into recession. They told Obama then, bail out California. Because they are the worst hit in the recession and the first hit, and because you could stop the entire American recession if you do that. Obama didn't do that. And there was a poll by Rasmussen that said 55% of Americans said, go bankrupt, California. Now, I would point out to you, California was a donor state. Economists said, bail us out. Obama did nothing. Obama provided no assistance, and 55% of our fellow Americans said, tough. Well, we went into the worst recession we'd seen since the 30s. And by 2012, California was still the worst hit place in all of America. So we told them, hey, we're going to be the worst hit. They did nothing. And we were the worst hit, and we stayed there for years, and they still did nothing. Trump is not president at this time. So there's the California drought around 2015. President Obama provides no federal assistance for dealing with the drought. He gives some financial assistance to rich farmers. He meets with no Valley people who are suffering from the drought. He meets with no Latino farm workers who are dealing with the drought. But he does have time to travel to see Cesar Chavez's wife, take a photo with her, and then fly back to D.C. Now, as a Latino and as a Californian, we know exactly what happened. I talked to Latinos at that time. They felt that Barack Obama spit in their face. They're here. We're having a real hard time. He comes and acts like he's going to help out, doesn't even meet with us, but takes a photo to make it seem that he's down with the brown. That was a horrible response by Barack Obama in 2015 with the drought. And we got no assistance at all. And we got no financial assistance. And that was Obama. Then we go to 2016, the very next year. Forest fires. Donald Trump denies federal assistance for the fires and cuts emergency assistance for us. Then we go to 2020 with the coronavirus. The federal government can't declare an emergency, can't provide equipment. We use our own rainy day fund to buy ventilators. And then we have so many that the feds begin to confiscate them. So we're a donor state. We pay more into the system. We used our own $1.6 billion rainy day fund to buy ventilators. And we bought so many and took care of ourselves so well that the feds then came and started confiscating it from us. So they did nothing for us. We pay more into the system. We dipped into our own money, bought it, and then they stole that too. Yes, the federal government's coming to California and take ventilators after we provided enough, which came from our rainy day fund. Jackie Spear, April 16th, 2020, pointed out that the small business loans as a federal assistance in this economic emergency for the COVID emergency have gone primarily to the Midwest, and California did not get its fair share. So April 16th, Jackie Spear, Californian, points out, hey, the federal government is shortchanging California with our assistance in this emergency. What I find interesting was why she's surprised. May 5th, 2007. May 5th, 2007, Dianne Feinstein points out the federal government shortchanged us on 9/11 funding. The death toll from terrorist attacks conceivably could be worse than the death toll from coronavirus. They didn't help. Here we are again, no help. So that's 4 presidents, 31 years, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, health, fire, earthquakes, economic recessions, and tough California. So here's my suggestion. Let's not act like bumbling, stupid idiots anymore. For 30 years, across 2 Dems, 2 reps, it's always down to us taking care of it ourselves. So why don't we not wait ever again? The next emergency, don't even wait to ask the federal government what they're doing. Don't let additional Californians lose property, lose money, live in terror, or get killed because you're waiting for the feds to wait. Yes, all those things happen when you wait for the feds to respond. In the future, given all the evidence that I've shown, 11 different crises over 31 years, regardless of who's in charge, we had to do it ourselves. We were not taken care of. The entire help was not given to us. We always had to foot at least part of the bill. We always had to raise taxes on us, and we always had to provide the majority of our own direction. So let's just make that a standing policy that next emergency, we don't wait and we don't ask the feds for anything. We just do it. Or let's have more Californians get killed, die, have our economy go into a recession, have homes get burned, have people live in terror. Your call.